All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Ultimate Force Doctrine. Men enforce all rights at the cost of their lives. Written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. The Ultimate Refusal, why indifference is the only weapon left for men. Smashing the Marxist feminist matrix, the fake tests, and the silent suicide of the West with the hammer of logic. Look into the hollowed out face of the modern male and tell me what you see. It is the stare of a man who has been told his existence is a crime, his protective instinct a pathology, and his sacrifice a mere expectation. We are living through the catastrophe of silence, a calculated mutilation where the emotional economy of men is starved by a culture that demands our lifeblood while refusing us even a drop of sustenance. This is not a coincidence. It is the inevitable conclusion of a gynocentric order that views the masculine spirit not as a partner in civilization, but as a beast of burden to be whipped and discarded once its utility wanes. I will employ the hammer of the trivium, logic, rhetoric, and grammar to shatter the glass jaws of the Marxists and feminists who have built a modern Babylon on the lies of equality. We will examine the deeds of despair statistics, not as mental health failures, but as the logical outcome of a utility-based society that renders the male disposable after extraction. You will see that the suppression of male pain is the structural foundation of their power, and without your silence, their entire house of cards collapses. Prepare yourself, because we are going to walk through the fire of reality, from the fake tests of relationships to the demonic absurdity of critical theory. You will learn to wield indifference as a shield, and to understand that enforcing your rights requires the willingness to die for them. This is the Ultimate Force Doctrine, and it is the only thing standing between you and the void. The catastrophe of silence. The statistics regarding male suicide in the West are not merely tragic. They are an accounting ledger of a utility-based extraction scheme reaching its inevitable terminus. When we analyze the deeds of despair that claim the lives of men in middle age, we are not looking at a mental health crisis. We are observing the logical outcome of a society that treats men as biological machinery. Once the utility of the man, his labor, his sperm, his protection has been extracted by the gynocentric system, he is rendered disposable. This is the silent suicide, a calculated demolition of the male spirit, where a man, realizing he is valued only for what he can produce rather than who he is, unplugs himself from the matrix. The data proves it, as men are increasingly alienated from their families through the brutal meat grinder of family courts, where Title 4D incentives incentivize the state to harvest fathers for child support. The death toll climbs. This is not a failure of modern medicine. It is the success of a cynical policy that views a male without economic output as a waste product. This spiritual hollowing out, this starving the beast, creates a vacuum that nature abhors, yet the modern West insists on filling with poison. We are witnessing a psychological autopsy of the existential male crisis, a form of social mutilation where the culture demands his lifeblood, his innovation, his sacrifice, his tax dollars, while refusing him any nourishment in return. The emotional economy is bankrupt. The demand is infinite, but the supply of honor and purpose is zero. They have removed the living spirit from men by stripping away his sacred duty. For centuries, a man's purpose was tethered to protection and provision within his own tribe, a transcendental burden that gave his suffering meaning. Now the state has monopolized the protection role and stolen the provision role, leaving the male biological imperative to wither on the vine. The void left by this theft is not filled with nihilism by accident. It is filled with nihilism because a man without a purpose to die for is a man who finds no reason to live. The reaction to this starvation is the flight into solitude, a biological imperative for male sovereignty that the collective utterly despises. The myth of the lone wolf is not a myth but a survival strategy for the hunted, yet we see the herd of emasculates those docile, domesticated men who have traded their balls for the comfort of compliance, demonizing male solitude at every turn. Why does the collective hate the man who stands alone? Because his independence is a living rebuke to their cowardice. The attempt to pathologize male solitude is a desperate defense mechanism of the weak, who know that if men stop performing for the herd, the whole illusion of gynocentric power crumbles. They call you isolated, I call you fortified. They call you bitter, I call you sober. To keep these men from realizing their power and rioting against their exploitation, the empire deploys the modern equivalent of Rome's bread and circuits. The Romans knew that a hungry populace was a dangerous populace, so they threw them free bread and distracted them with chariots and lions. Today, the distraction economy is far more insidious. We are fed digital sedatives, pornography to drain our vital energy, streaming services to numb our minds, and the infinite scroll to replace genuine achievement with the dopamine hit of passive observation. These are the digital circuses designed to pacify the male rage, to keep the beast docile and sedated in his cubicle, while his heritage is sold off to the highest bidder. It is a pacification strategy, a chemical lobotomy via the blue light of a screen, ensuring that the testosterone which once built civilization is now dissipated into the ether of pixels and fantasy. In this theater of distraction, the greatest trick the enemy ever pulled was the linguistic weaponization of the term toxic masculinity. We must deconstruct this using the grammar of history. When the leftist cultural Marxists screech about toxicity, they are not describing a pathology. They are describing the invincible necessary force that carved Western civilization out of the wilderness. The very attributes they label toxic aggression, drive, unyielding stoicism are the fuel that powered the engines of Rome, Athens, and the Enlightenment. What they call toxic is simply masculinity in its unbridled, effective state. By framing strength as a poison, they hope to convince the male to drink the antidote of weakness, which is, of course, death. We must reject this feminization not as a moral failing, but as the precursor to the fall. Every civilization that tamed its wolves was subsequently devoured by the dogs that replaced them. We must employ the trivium to distinguish between the leftist narrative of trauma and the masculine reality of sacrifice. The transcendental need for suffering is a hard pill for the soft modern mind to swallow. The leftist creates a victim narrative out of trauma, a passive state where the world is done unto them. The masculine imperative reclaims suffering as a vessel of divine burden. Meaningless trauma is for the weak. Meaningful sacrifice is for the strong. This is the syllogism of suffering. Major premise: the suppression of male pain is the structural foundation of the current gynocentric order. Minor premise: pain is the signal that demands a boundary be enforced. Conclusion: a society that forbids men to express their pain or enforce their boundaries inevitably collapses because it has removed the immune system of the culture. They silence the scream because they fear the rage that follows. This brings us to the only logical conclusion left for the rational man. We must stop seeking permission to exist from a system that wants us dead. The reclamation of pain is the catalyst for the only doctrine that matters, the realization that rights are not granted by courts or constitutions, but enforced by the will of the individual. The ultimate force doctrine is the philosophical understanding that enforcing your rights requires the willingness to die for them. We have been told that peace is the absence of conflict, but the Western canon teaches us that true peace is the result of victory. You cannot negotiate with a pathogen, you must destroy it. The refutation of the leftist, feminist, and Marxist lies is not a debate. It is a purification by fire. We must cast these demons out of our consciousness not by arguing with them, but by becoming so undeniably, irrefutably strong that their lies simply bounce off us like pebbles against tank armor. You must make yourself hard, you must make yourself dangerous, and you must direct that danger with the precision of a surgeon toward the lies that seek to unmake you. The reasoning behind this interaction follows a basic logical structure. Women need male attention just as the body needs air. Yet current feminist ideology encourages them to avoid reciprocating while still insisting on dedication. Consequently, the man who learns to remain unconcerned immediately flips the balance of power, turning himself into the desired object instead of the chaser. This biological truth reveals the core falsehood of our feminist age, the idea that men must keep pursuing what avoids them, while showing that what progressives label toxic detachment is actually the ultimate method for men to protect themselves in a biased system. My encounter with this individual in today's corrupt society simply backs up what evolutionary psychology and traditional Western knowledge have always shown. When a man stops offering validation, he takes back his control and makes the world follow natural rules instead of feminist fantasies. The fortitude of indifference. I sat across from a creature of the modern dating market, a woman who had been fed a steady diet of Disney delusion and third-wave feminism, expecting me to jump through hoops of fire simply to breathe her air. She sat there scrolling through her phone, offering me nothing but a cold shoulder and a sense of entitlement that defied the laws of physics. Instead of pleading for her attention or buying her a drink to earn the privilege of being ignored, I simply stopped caring. I leaned back, checked my watch, and looked right through her as if she were a ghost. The transformation was instantaneous and violent. The frame shattered, her arrogance dissolved into confusion, and suddenly she was chasing me. This is the modern Sodom, where the application of cold indifference acts as a crucible that burns away the fake veneer of female superiority, revealing the desperate need for male validation beneath. It was a perfect microcosm of the larger war. Once you refuse to be a beast of burden, the parasite realizes it has lost its host. We must apply the iron logic of the trivium to understand this dynamic. Consider the following syllogism. Premise 1. The current genocentric order demands your total destruction, calling it love or equality while it seizes your assets and dignity. Premise 2. Engaging with a system that wants you destroy you is irrational and suicidal. Therefore, the conclusion is unavoidable. Indifference is the highest form of self-love and the only viable path to survival. To care about a society that hates you is to be a turkey voting for Christmas. We are dealing with a structure that demands your blood as the down payment for your own oppression. The only rational response, the only mathematical move that results in a positive outcome for your life is to withdraw your emotional labor and starve the beast. There is a profound difference between the silence of a king and the silence of a coward. The aloof alpha is not hiding in his basement out of fear. He is withholding his energy because he knows it is a precious resource. The bitter incel is silent because he feels impotent, but the rational man is silent because he is observing. We must reclaim this stoic detachment not as a sign of weakness, but as the calm before the storm. It is the lion watching the gazelle. The lion does not feel the need to bark or argue. He waits. This silence is power waiting to be unleashed, a coiled spring of potential energy that the leftist hags and their white knight enablers find terrifying because they cannot manipulate it. You hear the constant refrain from the media, the corporate HR departments, and the screeching voices on social television: man up, step up, be a man. This is a rhetorical trap of the highest order. It is a con game, a logical fallacy known as an appeal to flattery, combined with a shifting of the burden of proof. They demand you step up to a game where the dice are loaded, the dealer is cheating, and your winnings are confiscated before you even leave the table. They want you to engage in a rigged social contract where your duties are infinite and your rights are non-existent. When a society refuses to enforce your rights but demands your sacrifice, the demand for you to man up is nothing more than a slave driver cracking the whip, hoping you don't notice the chains on your ankles. We must aggressively debunk this lie. True masculinity is not about being a utility for a system that despises you, but about having the courage to say no. The leftists, in their infinite biological ignorance, claim that when men withdraw and opt out, it is merely immaturity or a pathetic temper tantrum. They could not be more wrong. Evolutionary biology explains this male shutdown as a physiological defense mechanism. When a male perceives a lack of reciprocity in his environment, when his investment yields zero returns, his biology screams at him to conserve resources. It is a survival instinct hardwired into our DNA by millions of years of harsh selection. This is not toxic masculinity. It is the human organism reacting rationally to a parasitical environment. The data backs this up. We see male suicide rates skyrocketing to 3 or 4 times that of women, and we see men dropping out of the workforce and the mating pool in droves. This is not a bug in the software. It is the body rejecting the virus of feminism. This brings us to the doctrine of non-engagement. If you want to kill a virus, you quarantine it. You do not invite it to dinner. By refusing to validate female hysteria or Marxist tantrums, you are effectively enforcing a hard boundary. You are starving the emotional vampire of its host. When a woman attempts to bait you into an argument, or a leftist tries to shame you with their invented nonsense, your refusal to engage is not cowardice. It is a tactical nuclear strike. It denies them the energy they need to sustain their delusions. You are not participating in their theater of the absurd. You are looking at them as a scientist looks at a petri dish with detachment and curiosity, denying them the satisfaction of your anger. Let us look at the cold, hard economic calculus of the situation. If you were an investor, would you put your capital into a bank that steals your money, insults you daily, and offers a 0% return on investment while demanding 100% effort? Of course not. Yet, modern men are expected to invest their time, money, and emotional energy into a feminist framework that guarantees a net loss. We look at the family courts, where men lose custody of their children in roughly 80% of cases despite being fit parents, and are forced to pay exorbitant fees under the threat of prison. The ROI of caring in this system is negative. Therefore, indifference is the only rational economic policy for the modern man. It is the only way to stop the bleeding of your vital resources. I want you to understand that pretending to be indifferent is not a mask. It is a fortress. In a culture that weaponizes male empathy, turning that empathy off is a necessary defensive measure. We are living in a world where your compassion is used as a weapon against you. They know you have a conscience, so they blackmail you with it. You must cultivate a stoic control mechanism, a mental shield that repels these attacks. This is not about becoming a robot. It is about preserving your humanity for those who actually deserve it. Your kindness is a gift, not a right, and in the current year you must guard it with your life. Finally, we face the will he step up paradox. A common tactic in relationships and society is for women or the system to withdraw support completely, to pull the rug out from under a man, to test his mettle and see if he will save the day. The blue-pilled man will sacrifice himself to hold up a collapsing roof, earning a pat on the head before being discarded. The red-pilled man understands the Phoenix Protocol. You must let the structure collapse. If she destroys the house to test you, let it burn. Do not pick up the pieces. Let the ashes settle. Only from the ash can the phoenix rise. By letting the failed structures of feminism and gynocentrism crumble under their own weight, we clear the ground for something true, something beautiful, and something that respects the transcendental rights of men. We have mapped the economic suicide of empathy and the biological necessity of the Phoenix Protocol, proving that the only rational response to a rigged game is to let the chips fall where they may. Yet, the collapse of the feminine frame is not always a slow decay. Sometimes, the destruction of the Marxist dialectic happens in a singular, brilliant flash of masculine refusal. We must now move from the strategy of withdrawal to the tactical application of the trivium, where grammar defines the boundaries of the lie and logic refuses to validate the emotional hysterics of the degenerate. The man who masters this does not merely step aside, he stands his ground and watches the attacker impale themselves on their own blade, creating a living monument to the good, the true, and the beautiful. The deception of the test. Did you hear the one about the man who stared down the firing squad of human resources and simply refused to load the gun himself? I once watched a colleague, let's call him Marcus, dragged into a corporate interrogation room because a female subordinate felt unsafe because he had corrected her work in front of peers. This was the classic shit test, blown up to institutional proportions, a trap designed to force him into an apology for a non-crime, to bend his knee to the emotional frame of a professional victim. The HR director, a woman with eyes like flint, demanded he confess to insensitivity. Marcus, understanding the logic of refusal, did not argue. He did not debate the facts. He simply asked, "What specific rule did I break?" When she sputtered about vibes and feelings, he packed his briefcase and stood up. "If I haven't broken a rule, this meeting is over." By refusing to solve her emotional puzzle, by refusing to apologize for his competence, he collapsed the entire accusatory frame. He proved in that moment that he owned the reality of the room while they were merely squatters in a land of delusion. Solving the test proves you are a slave to the frame. Dismissing it proves you own the frame. We must recognize this behavior for what it is, not a social complexity to be navigated, but a biological maladaptation run wild. In the evolutionary arms race, a woman giving a man a fake test, a problem with no solution designed to elicit a reaction, was once a crude filter for genetic fitness. A way to ensure she wasn't mating with a simp who would fold under pressure. But in the modern context, this instinct has been hijacked by the Marxist dialectic, transforming a relationship into a perpetual struggle session. The fake test is the engine of critical theory, keeping a man in a state of constant apology and penance, robbing him of his vital essence. Look at the data. We live in a time where the cuckoldry rate sits at a non-zero percentage, where family courts award sole custody to mothers roughly 80% of the time, stripping men of their children, and where male suicide rates are 3 to 4 times higher than women's. This is not equity. This is the harvest of a philosophy that demands men solve problems that were manufactured specifically to destroy them. To dismantle this, we employ the trivium, the ancient armor of the Western mind. First, grammar, define the test. Is it a legitimate request for resources or labor? No, it is an emotional manipulation. Second, logic, assess its validity. Does the problem have a solution? If the problem is you exist, there is no solution other than ceasing to exist, which is a logical absurdity. Third, rhetoric, destroy the argument. Do not engage with the premise. Laugh at it, mock the frame. When a woman or a leftist throws a verbal tantrum, they are inviting you into a trap of their own making. The only winning move is to set fire to the maze. This is the logic of refusal. You do not explain why you won't jump through the hoop. You assert that the hoop is made of trash and you have a civilization to build. This brings us to the distinction between the ugly fake test and the true test, the latter aligning perfectly with the transcendental value of beauty. The fake test is a manipulation, a crab bucket mechanism designed to drag you down. The true test is the act of building, sustaining, and protecting. It is the nurturing side of the monster that the feminists desperately try to hide. They scream that men are inherent dangers, that the patriarchy is a system of abuse, but history and the hard data prove otherwise. Who actually civilizes the young? The statistics are undeniable. Children raised without a father figure are significantly more likely to drop out of school, abuse drugs, and end up in prison. Men are the primary architects of structure and the primary civilizers of the young. The monster is the only one capable of holding back the chaos, and the monster does this not through performative tests, but through the quiet, authentic act of provision. Observing how a man acts around children reveals the metric of his worth more accurately than any corporate performance review or female shit test ever could. A man does not test a child to see if the child is worthy of his protection. He simply protects. This is the essence of strategic dominance. Stepping up does not mean jumping through hoops to prove your worth to a woman or a boss who despises you. It means defining the hoops yourself and crushing the ones that are deformed. It is recognizing that the modern Babylon of woke relies on your participation in your own humiliation. The moment you stop apologizing for your nature is the moment you reclaim the living spirit of the West. You enforce your rights, not by asking permission, but by the sheer weight of your presence and the undeniable reality of your utility. We do not seek validation from the weak. We build the world that allows them to exist. But make no mistake, the mere act of building and nurturing invites the envy of the degenerate demons who thrive in the shadows of academia. Wielding the Frankensteinian monster of critical theory to tear down everything we hold dear, we face a pathology of the professional victim, a cancerous mindset that rehashes Marxist class conflict into racial grievance. Seeking to atomize men through the metaphysical suicide of intersectionality rather than uniting them in the transcendent brotherhood of the West. To truly protect the child and the future, we must stop apologizing to these architects of our demise and recognize that the only remedy for such wickedness is the absolute, unyielding application of the ultimate force, the aether of falsehoods. I stand before the firing line of history and tell you plainly, rights are not granted by the benevolence of bureaucrats or the weeping statues of false liberty. Rights are enforced by the very breath in your chest, backed by the absolute willingness to expend your life to secure them. This is the ultimate force doctrine, the final red pill that dissolves the sugar coating of civilization and reveals the steel structure beneath. You have been sold a lie that your rights are consumer products to be handed out like candy. But the reality is that the good, the true, and the beautiful exist only because men have historically been willing to kill and die to prevent the void from swallowing them whole. We must acknowledge our struggles not as failures of the system, but as the necessary friction of reality, and we must reject the fake tests of toxic masculinity, which are nothing more than psychological shackles designed to geld you before you can even mount the horse of your own destiny. To rebuild a world where your rights are respected, we must smash the lies of critical theory, feminism, and cultural Marxism so thoroughly they can never return from the shadows, reclaiming the transcendental spirit of the West that built the greatest cultures in the known universe. Consider the academic fraud Frank B. Wilderson III, a man who has constructed a Frankensteinian monster out of Marxist class conflict by sewing the head of racial grievance onto the corpse of economic determinism. His theory of anti-blackness's structure is not a truth seeking the light. It is a rehashed mechanism to atomize men by race, designed to turn a potential brotherhood of builders into a chaotic mob of victims. Wilderson argues that the very fabric of civilization is irredeemably hostile to black existence, yet he does so from the tenured comfort of a university system funded by that very civilization. Using the logic of the West to tear down the West. This is the wicked evolutionary biology of leftism in action, a survival strategy for the incompetent that relies on infecting the host with guilt until it stops defending itself. If we accept his premise that all structures are inherently anti-black, we must ask why he continues to participate in them. Unless he is merely a grifter selling a map to a maze that doesn't exist to men who are lost in the dark. This leads us to the syllogism of absurdity, a logical chainsaw that guts the anti-blackness argument in seconds. If Wilderson claims that all structures are irredeemably anti-black, then his theory itself is a structure of anti-blackness, rendering it void by its own internal logic. It is a snake eating its own tail, a philosophical Ouroboros that disappears in a puff of self-refutation the moment you apply the rules of basic grammar and logic. This is the hallmark of the leftist ideology. It is built on a foundation of self-contradiction, demanding you believe that the only way to end racism is to make every interaction about race. And the only way to achieve equality is to enforce a hierarchy of victimhood. They use hermeneutics of suspicion, a tool meant to question authority, only to establish themselves as the new priest class, interpreting the sacred texts of oppression for a congregation of emasculated men. In the trenches of labor and the reality of the streets, this academic nonsense evaporates. I have seen men of every race, black, white, brown, shoulder to shoulder on construction sites, bleeding the same red blood and sweating the same salt, while the ivory tower intellectuals tell them they are enemies. This is the woke matrix versus the real world. The professional victim, a degenerate demon of the highest order, relies on fabricated oppression to leverage power from hard-working men, using the state as a bludgeon to extract resources. Look at the divorce courts and the suicide rates. These are the battle scars of a culture that has demonized male utility while worshiping female grievance. The left divides men into victim hierarchies, destroying the unity of man required for the transcendence of Western civilization, because they know that united, men are an unstoppable force of creation and destruction. The sole route to redemption and the recovery of self-governance lies in returning to the great works of the West, serving as the counteragent to today's divisive social sciences. We must refuse the promotion of frailty that signals the collapse of civilizations and restore a standard where individuals are assessed by their actions, not their identity metrics. We must wield facts to dismantle the current ideological state, exposing the flaws of leftist thinking and treating them with unyielding virtue. Men secure rights with their lives, and we must cease sacrificing for a culture that despises us, instead establishing a system where the good, the true, and the beautiful are tangible laws rather than mere ideas. You stand now at the precipice of clarity, looking down into the abyss of the modern world, and finally, you see the strings that have been pulling your limbs for decades. We have traversed the catastrophe of silence and armed you with the fortitude of indifference, equipping you with the only weapon that matters, the cold, hard blade of truth. Consider the family court statistics where men are stripped of their children and assets by a gynocentric machine that views fathers as nothing more than disposable sperm donors and wallets. This is not a bug in the system, but its defining feature. Look at the suicide rates, those deeds of despair that spike when men realize their utility has been exhausted, and tell me there is not a war against the masculine soul. These are not mere data points. They are the screams of a starving beast that you have been conditioned to ignore, but now you hear them loud and clear. The Marxist architects of our misery, peddling their anti-blackness as structure or any other flavor of critical theory drivel, want you to believe that your struggle is defined by melanin or manufactured victimhood, but we have sliced that lie to ribbons with the grammar of logic. The real structure is the one that pits men against their own nature, demanding they solve the fake tests of a society that despises them while simultaneously handing over the keys to the kingdom to the incompetent. When a woman tries to test you or a corporation tries to shame you, remember the Phoenix Protocol. Let it burn. Your indifference is not a weakness. It is the protective shell of your sovereignty. You do not step up to perform for a master who beats you. You step up to build a world where such masters do not exist. Now you possess the ultimate force doctrine. You know that enforcing your rights requires the willingness to lay down your life for them, but not before you have lived them with the ferocity of a cornered lion. You have seen that true nurturing, the kind that saves civilizations, is not found in the simpering compliance of the blue-pilled beta, but in the fierce protection of the red-pilled king who refuses to apologize for his strength. Do not keep this knowledge locked in the fortress of your mind. It is a weapon meant to be wielded. Go forth, shatter the illusions of the wicked, and redeem the living spirit of the West with your very breath. You are awake, and you are dangerous. And now the sponsored book introduction, Ultimate Force Doctrine. Men enforce all rights at the cost of their lives. I've spent decades watching the slow, systematic dismantling of everything that makes Western civilization magnificent. As a young man growing up, I sensed something was deeply wrong with how masculinity was being portrayed, diminished, apologized for, pathologized as toxic when it is, in fact, the very force that built the soaring cathedrals, the logical frameworks, the legal codes, and the philosophical bedrock that once elevated humanity above mere survival. My personal journey through academic corridors, business boardrooms, and the trenches of failed relationships exposed a coordinated effort to emasculate men at every turn. I witnessed brilliant male colleagues castrated by HR departments implementing anti-male policies, fathers destroyed in family courts despite their devotion, and generations of young men aimless without rites of passage or meaningful guidance. These experiences were not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a comprehensive assault on the masculine essence that has, since Genesis, served as the logos of ordered creation. The fundamental biological reality is that testosterone is not merely a hormone but a divine spark, the very same creative force that forged empires and conceptualized the abstract principles of justice, beauty, and truth. This biological imperative drives men to build systems, discover laws of nature, and impose meaning upon chaos. It is no accident that throughout history, when men embrace their true nature without apology, civilizations flourish, families remain intact, and spiritual traditions deepen. Conversely, when this masculine energy is suppressed, demonized, or redirected toward trivial pursuits, societies descend into nihilism, hedonism, and ultimately disintegration. We are witnessing this precise disintegration before our eyes. Western civilization stands on the precipice because its foundational architects, men, have been convinced to dismantle their own nature. This book represents the blueprint for reversal, for reclamation, for the resurrection of our divine masculine birthright. Many readers will find these truths uncomfortable, perhaps even threatening to their carefully constructed worldviews. If you are committed to feminist ideology, if you believe that all gender differences are social constructs, if you think masculinity is something to be cured rather than celebrated, then this book is absolutely not for you. Put it down immediately. Return to your safe spaces where equality of outcome replaces equality of opportunity, where feelings supersede facts, where the masculine spirit has been thoroughly domesticated. Your time would be better spent elsewhere, perhaps in courses that reinforce your existing beliefs, among like-minded thinkers who will never challenge your presuppositions, in activities that demand nothing of you and offer even less in return. This knowledge is not for those who prefer comfortable lies over difficult truths, nor for those unwilling to face the consequences of rejecting the very systems that enabled their privilege to critique them. For the man who senses the deep malaise of our age, who recognizes the hollowness of modern narratives that demand perpetual apology for his existence, who understands that something precious has been stolen from our cultural inheritance, this book serves as both revelation and revolution. It systematically deconstructs the philosophical frameworks, cultural mechanisms, and linguistic tricks employed by those seeking to dismantle Western civilization's patriarchal foundations. We will examine the Frankfurt School's insidious introduction of critical theory into our institutions, trace the etymology of words weaponized against masculinity, and expose the biological and psychological foundations of authentic male power. We will explore how testosterone functions as not merely a physical hormone, but as a creative force that manifests in art, architecture, legal systems, and spiritual practice. We will illuminate the profound connection between physical excellence and mental acuity, demonstrating that the temple of flesh is not vanity, but preparation for the battles of mind and soul that characterize the warrior's path. The reader will gain practical tools for reclaiming masculine authority in personal relationships, professional environments, and spiritual practices. You will learn how to recognize and counter the rhetorical strategies used by ideological opponents, how to build brotherhoods that withstand cultural hostility, and how to channel natural aggression into creative pursuits, rather than allowing it to be suppressed or expressed destructively. We will examine historical exemplars of masculine excellence, men who embodied the virtues of strength, honor, intellect, and spiritual depth, and extract actionable principles for contemporary application. You will discover the philosophical foundations of Western patriarchy and Greek logic, Roman law, and Judeo-Christian tradition, understanding how these elements synergistically created the most successful civilization in human history, precisely because they aligned with rather than opposed natural masculine imperatives. This is not merely another self-help book offering temporary motivation or superficial techniques. It represents a comprehensive framework for understanding your place in the cosmos as an agent of divine creation, equipped with both the biological imperative and the moral mandate to order reality according to truth, beauty, and goodness. The chapters that follow will challenge you intellectually, spiritually, and physically. They will demand that you confront uncomfortable realities about female nature, about cultural Marxism, about the conspiracy of silence that surrounds the destructive elements of feminism. They will require that you abandon comfortable mediocrity for the demanding path of excellence, the path walked by the great men who built Western civilization. The ultimate force doctrine is not for those seeking easy answers or temporary comfort. It is for men prepared to enforce rights, protect civilization, and rebuild what has been destroyed, even at the cost of their lives if necessary. For those ready to accept this burden, what follows will transform not merely your perspective, but your very essence. Ultimate Force Doctrine: Men Enforce All Rights at the Cost of Their Lives, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.